Hello and welcome back to Solomon's Cave and to the 7th video on Hebrew nouns, specifically noun clauses, also called nominal clauses or, for reasons that will become clear, verbless clauses. 2 videos ago, I introduced the notion that a noun can be in 2 states, namely the absolute state and the construct state. And I showed you the paradigm for what to do with a standard absolute noun to turn it into a construct noun. Then in the last video, we explored the different ways in which 2 nouns interact with each other if one of them is in the construct state and the other in the absolute state. Those constructions typically turn into expressions that explain a relationship or possession. And now we're going to look at combinations where 2 nouns are in the absolute state. But before I do so, I have to explain a bit of high school grammar. Grammarians have long distinguished between 2 types of sentences: verbal sentences and nominal sentences. Now, this is a distinction which the vast majority of English speakers probably aren't aware of. I'm sure your English teacher, or perhaps your Spanish or French or German teacher in high school, mentioned it. But the distinction probably went right over your head because who cares? You likely tried to remember it on your test, but as soon as you graduated, it disappeared in a giant black hole in your brain, along with trigonometry, redox reactions, and geography. Oh, and if you want to tell me that your high school teacher really didn't teach this subject, you're forgetting something. I teach middle and high school grammar, so I know what I'm talking about. But now, all of a sudden, this distinction isn't just relevant again, but vital for understanding what on earth is going on in Hebrew. So, let me give you a basic summary of the difference between verbal and nominal sentences. I'll leave the finer details behind, but in simple terms it goes as follows. In a verbal sentence, something happens. In a nominal sentence, something is, or is the case. Here, let me give you an example. The woman prophesies. The woman is a prophet. In the first sentence, something is happening. And in the second sentence, something is the case. Here's another one. The man sings. Something is happening. The man is a singer. Something is the case. Samson is fighting the Philistines. Something is happening. Don't let the word is fool you. The whole verbal expression is fighting, which is still an action. Samson is a fighter. Something is the case. Now to take this one tiny step further, let's look at what a clause is. All examples so far have been simple sentences that consist of one clause. Now let's combine 2 clauses into a composite sentence. Deborah is a prophet and she judges. One sentence and 2 clauses combined by the word and. The first clause is a, say it with me, nominal clause, and the second clause is a verbal clause. Now I could make this more complicated, but I think for now we've seen enough. So with that out of the way, let's take a step back and recall some things from the previous video. First, Hebrew nouns, besides being masculine or feminine and singular or plural or dual, were also divided into another category, namely absolute and construct. Looking at that final category, absolute and construct, I noted that there were 4 hypothetical options. Construct followed by absolute, construct followed by construct, absolute followed by absolute, and absolute followed by construct. Options 1 and 2 were discussed with quite some detail in the previous video, and option 4 does not exist, which is why I called it hypothetical just now. So all that is left for this video is to discuss what it means if an absolute is followed by another absolute. And this is where our understanding of nominal clauses becomes useful again. For one of the ways in which Biblical Hebrew can form a nominal clause is by placing the two nouns that form the nominal clause right next to each other in the absolute state without the verb is. Let's look at an example. David, melech. First, David, an absolute noun, followed by melech, which means king, another absolute noun. This clause can subsequently be translated as David is, or was, king. So, if you have two absolute nouns in a row, with no further context, you should read it as X is Y, where X is the first absolute noun and Y the second absolute noun. Are there exceptions to this? Yes, there are, but context will usually clear that up. But more important than two absolute nouns, which doesn't occur that often in the Bible, is if you replace one of those absolute nouns with something else. Here, let's get back to our example phrase and replace David with another word. Now you get hu melech. Hu means he, so a personal pronoun, and melech is still king, and an absolute noun. The translation is, he is king. Or what if we replace the word king, for example, with this? David gadol. David is still the absolute noun, and gadol means great. It is an adjective, and adjectives, like nouns, can also be in the absolute state, like it is here. The translation is now, David is great. As you can see, the basic concept that two absolute nouns next to each other forms a nominative clause, or noun clause, where you add the word is in translation, is very important when thinking about how to understand clauses and whole sentences. And this is why I suggest you bookmark this video, as well as the previous one about the function of construct and absolute nouns, as these concepts will come back again and again in Hebrew grammar. Now there is one more thing I would like to mention, and it ties back to the previous video and how to talk about possession or relationship. We saw that if you have a construct noun followed by an absolute noun, you can express an of relationship. For example, if the absolute noun is definite, like in Even HaMelech, it becomes the stone of the king. But if the absolute noun is indefinite, like in Even Melech, it becomes a stone of a king. But is there a way to say a stone of the king? Well, thankfully there is, and it involves two absolute nouns next to each other. Wait, hold on, didn't I just do a whole video about two absolute nouns that, when placed back to back, they form a noun clause rather than an of relationship? Why, yes, but there's a little trick you can do. Add a lamed preposition. This is most common when the second noun is a name, like in the heading over some of the Psalms, where it says Mizmor LeDavid, a psalm of David. Or this one, Ish Ladunai, a man of the Lord. So the lamed prefix, which often functions like the preposition to, now becomes a possessive lamed. Thanks for watching. If you want to support me on Patreon or become a member on YouTube, follow the links in the description so you can see my videos early, vote on topics, ask questions, and more. In the next few videos, we will be wrapping up nouns by introducing the last few prefixes and suffixes, while taking a few little excursions into adjectives and pronouns. But first, there is one more concept I want to discuss, as it relates to spelling, accents and stress. Pausa spelling.